Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us for another ER Studio webinar. We're excited to bring the Make Data Modeling webinar to you, communicating business value across the enterprise. I'm Melissa Brownlee, the Marketing Manager for ER Studio, and today we're excited to be joined by Scott Taylor, the Data Whisperer. Scott is a champion of data storytelling and data management, always focusing on the strategic why behind the data and not just the technical details. With decades of expertise, he now shares his expertise full-time as a content creator across events, videos, and yes, even puppet shows. He's a sought-after keynote speaker and has been recognized by Data IQ, CDO Magazine, and Dataversity as one of the most dynamic and entertaining voices in the industry. His book, Telling Your Data Story, is now available. Scott lives in Black Rock, Connecticut, where he enjoys kayaking, juggling pins, and blowing spur bubbles. Before I turn it over to Scott, just a few quick housekeeping notes. If you have any questions during the session, feel free to drop them in the chat. We'll try to answer some as we go and have set aside time at the end for Q&A. And with that, I will hand it over to Scott.
Thank you, Melissa. Hello, all you data modelers, data cats, data kitties, data guys, data gals, data kings, data queens, data jacks, data 10 of clubs, data jokers, data aces. I am Scott Taylor, Data Whisperer. Thrilled and delighted to be here with the folks at ER Studio to help you understand ways to make data modeling matter, communicating its business value across the enterprise. That's the point here today. How do you express the true strategic value of the work that you do? Or another kind of subtitle, we could just call it Telling Your Data Modeling Story. This is my special Gen AI edition, because all you have to do is add AI to stuff these days to make it modern, right? I've even tried that with my name. Phonetically, it works. Oh, wait a minute. Actually, I think I have the wrong slide here. No, it's my agentic AI edition with some vibe coding. So now I'm totally up to date. Today's topics, what are we going to talk about? We're going to talk about aligning data models with your enterprise goals. What's your company trying to do, and why does data modeling help you get there? Ways to communicate that strategic value, and the essence is you need to build a compelling narrative, a business accessible story that helps your business leaders understand why what you're doing is important. I haven't seen all the webinars that ER Studio's done, but I venture to say this will be the least technical of all of them, because we're going to talk about ways to tell a story. Everything we do today turns to data, and there's more data now than ever before. In fact, there's more data now than there was when we started this webinar about how there's more data now than ever before. And now wait, even more data. And enterprises of all sizes are struggling to make sense of it all, because instead of delivering fabulous insights, this data can cause all kinds of chaos. But you data modelers know how to use data to help grow your business, to help improve your business, to help protect your business. But do you know how to explain it to the business? Or do you just brag about modeling the latest analytics graph hub fabric mesh? Or ways to build a data-driven utopia of interoperability where insights flow freely from workflow to edge across integrated ecosystems? Or do you debate the subtle nuances between data product, data as a product, and data productization? Well, listen up, you data modelers and you CDOs, you CDAOs, you CDAIOU, and sometimes YOs. I never met a CEO or a CFO who cares about how you're going to do that stuff until they understand why it's important. The why, not the how. That's what we'll focus on today. So before we get too deep into it, I want to thank our sponsors, ER Studio. They help you build and model that data foundation that delivers integrated data management, helps you visualize that data architecture, and automate those model transformations across your enterprise, across all your workflows. And they help you do that while we deal today with this evolving data landscape. Yes, there's more data now than ever before, but what does that mean in your business every day? There's a shift towards this analytics first architecture, the rise again of the data as a product, data products, data productization, however you want to term that, productizing data to make it reusable and standardized across your enterprise. And of course, you want the integration between governance and modeling. Those two got to work hand in hand all the time. And we look for ways to do that as well. But why does data modeling have value? So here's the first exercise. When you describe these things, use a very simple vocabulary. See if you can actually use just single words. When you think about features, what something has, and benefits, why it's important, try to distill this down to the fewest number of words. Data modeling provides structure and an organized framework for your data. It helps with abstraction so you can get a high-level overview. It helps with representation so people can share an understanding of the entities and the connections and the hierarchies and all the structure you have to help power your foundational data across your enterprise. And benefits, these are unassailable and these are undebatable. It provides clarity, integrity, efficiency. There isn't a business person out there who's going to argue about not wanting more clarity, more integrity, and more efficiency when they use data. But is this your reality? I know we all find things in our average regular day that sort of remind us of little data anecdotes and data situations. This was mine on a recent visit to the Home Depot. If your data program is this bulb recycling sign that says clearly no fluorescence, but if you look at that data recycling bin, look at that. How'd they even fit those in there? How do they get away with this kind of stuff? Why do they think that's okay? And does this happen with your data? The business doesn't realize why it's important to follow the lessons and the standards you've set, then you need a story. Because if you're struggling for engagement from your sponsors, if you're struggling for sponsorship, if you're struggling for funding, money, you got to have the money to do the data work you want to do. You need a data story. In all respect to glorious data models, this is not your story. That's not the story. That's the what. That's the how. It's not the why. So it's soft skills time, people. I told you this was going to be the least technical webinar you're going to see from these folks because this is about communication. This is about sharing ideas. This is about listening and understanding the needs of your audience and ways to show them the benefits of what you have to offer. To be great at data, you got to be good at the hard skills. That's for sure. But you're up against a lot better storytellers in your organization. Marketing knows how to tell a story. That's what they do for a living. Sales knows how to tell a story. Otherwise, they wouldn't make quota. So you've got to beef up your storytelling acumen. And I'm sure Alanis Morissette would certainly characterize the fact that it's ironic. Soft skills are kind of hard. So my mission today is to give you new ways to talk about what you already know. You know about data modeling, you know about data management, you know about data governance, you know about how to work data across your organization. But if I can give you a little twist of phrase, a different angle, a couple of choice nuggets that you can use to help put a compelling message together, then I've done my job today. And anything I have and share with you, you can't steal it because I'm giving it to you. That's the purpose of today. Take some of this work that I've done, take some of these ways I talk about it, and see if it helps you do the same. Little background on me, my company's Meta Consulting. We're about what it's about. Meta, well, we talk about talking about data. That's what we do. And I provide what I call data evangelism as a service, a way to get people fired up by the data work you do. I come by this honestly. I spent almost 3 decades in enterprise data, actually on the supplier side, representing some iconic world-class data brands like Nielsen, where I developed a product called TD Links. Any of you use TD Links still? Let me know. Love to know it's still in existence out there. It was a unique identifier set, a highly structured, well-modeled set of standardized data that companies used internally to populate their own frameworks. Also at Dun & Bradstreet, WPP Kantar. So I had the pleasure really of talking to every type of enterprise at every level of data maturity across every sector all over the world. Got to limit my scope a little bit. But I began to hear common challenges. I began to realize they had similar goals and noted that if you're in an enterprise, the enterprise data problems and challenges you have are really ubiquitous across all types of enterprises. So whether you're in banking or finance or manufacturing or you're a digital native, if you're an enterprise, the things you are striving to do, the challenges you have, the goals you have for data are really They're not exactly the same, but they are more the same than they are different. I wrote a whole book about this topic, telling your data story, data storytelling for data management. And I'm going to use words like data management, data modeling, data governance almost interchangeably here because I see all those things as the way data starts, things that have to be done with data before you can use it across the enterprise. So that kind of terminology I'm bucketing together to a certain extent. But data storytelling for data management, the book right on the cover says 99% buzzword free. I didn't want to overpromise. Recently translated into French, where it's 99% Saint à la mode, which of course means no words with ice cream. We all want to be disruptive in the data space. I come by that honestly as well. I've been disruptive since the 4th grade. You can take a look at my class pictures, see if you can pick me out. That's me. Still love the polka dots. And in my report card, my teacher wrote, I was in the 4th grade. Scott is disruptive and distracting to others. I took that as a compliment. Now, when you talk about data, when you talk about data modeling, when you talk about data management, do your business partners ask, in the words of the great Canadian philosopher, I'm sure some of you were thinking Canadian philosopher, yes, Avril Lavigne, why do you have to go make things so complicated? Why do we do that in the data space? We make it so complicated. We don't have to. You might remember that from her 80s hit, Dater Boy. Data is so confusing. I'll give you some examples. I know a lot of you work in this stuff, but how does this sound to your business? The lake house. I'm sure your CEO thinks that's where your data goes on vacation. Your data fabric, it might have ripped. Your data mesh, it's tangled. So why don't you try the data Spanx? Yeah, it'll tighten up that integration. SQL, many of you use SQL, I'm sure. Probably also use NoSQL. You can put it in the chat here. Who knows what the NO in NoSQL stands for? What does the no stand for? Not only. It's the world's shortest acronym. NO equals yes. No equals yes in the data space. No wonder they don't understand this. Trying to create a standard for identification in the Internet of Things, only it's called idiot. That's not going to work. And you may have heard of integrated platform as a service with governance as a service called iPassGas. That is an elevator pitch you do not want to experience. Believe me, that's recently released from stealth but deadly mode. And a warning, some of you may work with IT, some of you may be in IT, some of you may have to deal with IT, and IT can be very scary. And you don't want to leave your data alone with IT. No, it doesn't always work out well either. All right, getting a little more serious here. What do you really want from data? I try to boil this down to just a couple of words. What I've seen every enterprise really want are 2 things, truth and meaning. They want trusted data that they can depend on, and they want to use that trusted data to drive meaningful activity at their enterprise. At a high level, isn't that what you want as well? And if you look at my data philosophy, my personal data philosophy, I boil that down to 3 words as well, truth before meaning. You need to determine the truth in your data before you derive meaning out of it. It's not chicken or egg here. It is egg and omelet. If you don't have the truth and trusted content, you're not going to get the meaning that you're planning. Truth before meaning. And on the data journey that most enterprises go on, how do we think about this truth before meaning journey? I bifurcate the entire space into 2 big buckets, truth before meaning, determining the truth. That's through exercises like data management, data governance, data quality, data modeling, data stewardship, master data, reference data, metadata, MDM, RDM, PIM, RAM, DAM, all those foundational activities that you know and I know you need to do to curate and steward and model and govern and distribute your core content across your enterprise before you get too far along in the deriving meaning part, which comes through business intelligence and analytics and data science and data literacy, visualization, AI, ML, all the cool, hot, super cool, fancy stuff that gets a disproportionate amount of the attention and funding given how dependent it is on the determining the truth part. I like to think of this as well as determining the truth. Data management is where data starts. Deriving meaning, business intelligence is where data ends up. If you don't start in the right place, you're not going to end up where you want to go. You don't need a quote from Yoda or Yogi Berra to understand that. We all know that. And because data ends up in analytics, that's what actually the business sees. That's what they tend to interact with. So they don't realize all the work that goes on in the determining the truth part and all that litany of activities that tend to be behind the scenes that people think of as too technical or clerical or back office or don't really add a lot of value. You can't do it on the meaning side unless you've got that truth before. And there's two types of data storytelling out there. There's the deriving meaning storytelling. I wish it had been called analytics data storytelling, actually, because that's what it's closer to. Stories with data. A lot of great books out there from some great friends of mine about ways to take a KPI or some kind of metric and visualize it, put it in some process to drive a business action. Super important. Telling stories with data is critical to use the data. But before you can tell stories with data, you have to tell stories about the data, about why managing data is important to begin with. You're not going to have stories with data if you don't have stories without data. I need both kinds of these storytelling. It's not Sophie's choice here. You got to have both. But the point is, think about both of them. And especially in the data modeling side, I think your story is more stories about data. There's another way to think about it. People talk a lot about feature and feature engineering, but all those features are on instances, right? Every entity has attributes. Observations, which are the truth, have variables. That provides the meaning. Across a foundation, you need to have all those silos. All those silos need a foundation. All those verticals need a horizontal. All those columns need a row. Rows and columns. I'm talking about this conceptually because I don't want to get too far into unstructured data and all that other stuff. But essentially, and when it comes to the business, they think about it as rows and columns. The rows are the truth. The columns are the meaning. The columns are what give you that insight. But without the rows, you don't know what that insight's about. And on a recent trip to the Acropolis, I was reminded it was all about rows and columns. Generative AI, generative artificial intelligence comes along and everybody thinks, uh-oh, do we have a new story? Do we? I know some people think you can use it for data management. You can. It's become kind of the Ozempic of data management, if you will, but it still needs some important stuff to happen before you can really leverage it. And it wasn't too long after Gen AI came out that people were talking about the training corpus and the need for AI governance as well as data governance. And before that, during COVID, everybody went into e-commerce and enterprises were complaining about how their product reference data had problems. And there were record MDM inquiries with the industry analysts. And before that, in data science, remember when that came out, people were talking about, oh, we spent 80% of our time munging and wrangling data, and the other 20% complaining about munging and wrangling. Before that, big data, volume, velocity, variety, these waves of unstructured data coming at us. Where's the value? The value happens when you put some form of structure on it, a tag, some context. So big data needs little data. And if you think back pre-2K, when I got started in the data business, everybody was putting in these big enterprise systems, ERP and CRM, and the vernacular started to change as people spoke about harmonizing legacy data, and silos and domain masters started to pop up in the vocabulary. Now let's go way back. I got more room on this slide. Let's go way back before computers. Let's go back before electricity to the concept of a general ledger. You still need a chart of accounts. So, do we have a new story? Well, from Gen AI all the way back to Gen Ledger, it's the same story. Truth before meaning. You need structured data to drive any of these activities. And so I will say to you that data modeling and the need for data modeling is macro trend agnostic. No matter what we have on this slide, no matter what's happening next, no matter the new, hot, cool, sexy thing that's going to come through in the next 2 years that nobody even thought of, it's still, if it has to do with technology, it has data. And if it has data, that data needs to be modeled. No two ways about it. Because the truth about data modeling is the success of every digitally transformative customer-facing initiative, every as-a-service offering, every enterprise software implementation, every autonomous, decentralized, agentic AI orchestration framework is inextricably linked to the successful output of your data modeling and data management efforts. No two ways about it. Now, that was just the longest-winded, most complicated way I could say something we all already know. GIGO. Garbage in, garbage out. We learn it on the first day of data. It's as sure as gravity. What goes up must come down. What goes in must come out. I try and elevate that concept to the idea of the golden rule of data. Do unto your data as you would have it do unto you. What you put in to data management is what you get out of business intelligence. Because you put bad data into an ERP, you're going to get a lousy ERP. You put bad data into CRM, you're going to miss your customer opportunities. You put bad data into FinTech, you'll get a visit from the regulators. Bad data into BI, BS. Bad data into AI, AS, artificial stupidity. Because no matter how you slice it or how you dice it, the golden rule of data prevails. Do unto your data as you would have it do unto you. Did I get any amens there in the chat? There's a little bit of that evangelism for you. Or to position it a little more philosophically, good decisions made on bad data are just bad decisions you don't know about yet. My most quoted quote, feel free to use it with attribution anywhere it helps you make a point. Now, data management, I know it can be painful. It can hurt. So can data modeling. I remember early in my career, I was talking to a sales organization and the business leader stood up at the end of the room. He said, Scott, you know, we don't need all this stuff you're talking about. I can slice and dice my data any way I want to. All I have to do is push a button. This very courageous data person at the end of the table stood up and said, hey, I'm the button. Are you the button in your organization? Your leadership, all they have to do is just ping you, press you, and they get what they want. It hurts, doesn't it? I'm going to show you what data pain looks like. Warning here, this is graphic content. Many of you are watching this at home. You may want to make sure your children are not in the room. This is going to be very disturbing to any data stewards watching. I call this naked data because there's no way to hide from it. Here it is. Ready? There you go. That's it. These are from embarrassingly large global enterprises who don't know what they're doing with Coca-Cola. Can't spell Nestle the same way twice. Trying to figure out 7-Eleven. I don't know if you picked it up yet, but 7 equals 11. Not in base 10. I had someone come up after I did this at a conference, and they came out and said, well, 7 equals 11 in hexamal. I'm like, keep that to yourself, will you? This last column was taken from a manufacturing company who put people in the field to track causal data in locations. And we took a look at their entire database. They had over 275 different configurations of the 7-Eleven banner name. A lot of creativity in the field. None of it selling product. And if you think the software is going to fix it on its own, you know, you put this in Excel and you get July 11th. Unless you're watching from Europe, and then you get November 7th. So even we can't agree. How well modeled is that data? Sometimes your data can be good, but the system doesn't read it right from this shoe product page. Take a look at the sizes. By the way, I wear a 5th of October. You fix this by structuring your data. You structure your data by modeling your data. And structured data works harder than unstructured data. I get a lot of pushback from those unstructured data fans when I post this on LinkedIn, but I tell them, come at me, because the only way you get value out of unstructured data is to put some kind of structure on it. And structured data drives your operations. Structured data is the foundation of all your analytics. Structured data drives and enables interoperability. That's what structured data does. Unstructured data is nice and certainly has a lot of potential, but the structured data you've got is what really makes your organization go. But talking about structured data and structuring data and data modeling with business folks can get confusing. So think about these 4 C's of data structure. You're not going to model off of these, but again, just in a conversation with somebody, what are the critical elements of data structure when you're thinking about entities at an enterprise? Code, company, category, and country. Code. You need a unique identifier. You need some form of structured identifier that allows you to disambiguate this thing, to identify this thing, to authenticate its identity, to resolve duplicates, to do counts, to do how many things do we have? It depends on, you count all the different unique identifiers. You've got a code on every record. I have a code, therefore I am in a database. After that, you need a hierarchy or some form of parent-child relationship. We'll call that a company in this context. Who owns it? Now, you may model different levels of that hierarchy depending on the business needs. Might be ship to, build to, plan to, sell to, all the different levels of a hierarchy, and then a full relationship for that unified commercial view that a lot of executives want to see. Give me one number about this relationship and it all rolls up. And hierarchy and company let you do all kinds of significant use cases, like, okay, we're dealing with the bottom left oval. Do we know it was related to the bottom right oval? Then you need to have a category, because you have to know what kind of thing it is. And category helps with all sorts of marketing and segmentation activity, market share, targeting. We're really good with this kind of thing. How do we find more of this kind of thing? That can be problematic too when you take a look at some folks' taxonomy. I mean, I haven't looked at all your category structure, but I will bet most of you have a top 10 category called other. You may have something called other. I know why you have other, because it's so hard to spell miscellaneous. There was one database I looked at that had an attribute value under category. It said DK. Asked them what that meant. And they said, don't know. Because that's other. And just because they all begin with C, you need country or some form of geography. Where is this thing? What's the physical location if that's valuable? Geography drives all sorts of data activity, access, security, where that data can be located. So you need that geography as well. And there's all kinds of granularity in that too. If you're doing marketing, it might be zip code, postal code, city, state, province, sales market, media market, measurement market, all different configurations of geography. Code, company, category, country. You might call it something different, and feel free to use the relevant vocabulary for your particular enterprise. It might be an entity, hierarchy, taxonomy, geography. It might be location, account, channel, market. It could be a product, a brand, a segment, and a region. It might be an item, an owner, a sector, and a location, a thing, a parent, a type, a place, but it's where it is, what it is, who it is, and that it's unique. And when you have those 4 C's on your data, when you've modeled it correctly, all kinds of data problems go away. Let's take a Zen data moment here. Just thinking about all those problems going away for you. I'm going to take a deep data cleansing breath. I feel better already. Let's put this in play. Here's a polygon, represents some kind of geography. It could be Atlanta, it could be the Northeast, it could be EMEA, but it's some configuration of geography. There are things in it. Those things are unique and belong to different types of hierarchy. Those owners or that hierarchy elements may be in the geography or outside of the geography, and they put their things wherever they want to, no matter how you define your location. And you have to know what markets those are in. So this could be store, account, market. This could be entity, hierarchy, taxonomy, geography. This could be any way you want to look at it that gives you a structured answer. And there's all sorts of reporting that this type of crazy cartoon configuration represents. For instance, we're doing something in yellow. How many things do we have and what types are they? We're working with green. What markets are they in? We're dealing with blue. Who do they compete with? Entity, hierarchy, taxonomy, geography, code, company, category, country, core to any kind of data model. Here's another framework. Talked about the 4 C's. Let's talk about the 8 8s of data value. And again, these aren't things to program or model off of. These are just concepts and vocabulary that you might be able to use to explain that value. And there's only 8 places I have seen in an organization where you get data value. And what I mean by data value, it's where most of the data that most of the time brings most of the value most often, okay? The big stuff you do. You could find an edge case here or there, but we're not talking about the exceptions and the outliers. We're talking about what most of your company knows about and cares about and is trying to do. So these 8 8s, they start in a framework, and at the pinnacle is relate. You want to build relationships from your organization. You want to build relationships. You want to grow relationships. You want to mitigate the risks of some kind of relationships. If you don't have relationships, you don't have a business. So relationships and relating in some way is the pinnacle value of what data can provide. But before you do that, way down on the bottom, you got to validate. You got to disambiguate. You got to make sure you don't have duplicates. Is this thing trusted? Do I have it already? Is it trying to trick me? What kind of validation and verification process do you have before you even bring an entity in to your data bloodstream? Validate first. Otherwise, you get all that garbage in, as I talked about. Then you want to integrate. You want to take all these disparate data sources you have about something and pull them all together somehow. Again, I'm avoiding the technical terminology on purpose, but integration, pulling all these things together. Nobody takes a single source of data about anything anymore. If you want to drive those analytics and get that insight, you got to integrate that data together, and a data model obviously helps you do that. Then you want to aggregate. Most reporting, certainly at the leadership level, is some form of aggregation. How many things do we have? What markets are they in? And who owns them? And what type are they? Sound like code, company, category, country? All that kind of aggregation, rolling stuff up from the most granular level all the way up to the most ultimate parent level is key to a lot of the reporting that certainly your leadership cares about. Then you want to be able to interoperate. How do the machines talk to each other? There is no single software platform that goes across everything you do, but the data you have might. And so that data has got to be able to be help enable that interoperation between all those different silos and systems. And once you build that foundation, then you can evaluate. Then you do analytics. Then you do the kind of BI reporting that most folks depend on because you've got that foundational data well modeled to help roll that stuff up and do that evaluation. And you deliver that valuation through being able to communicate, be able to talk about it, be able to share that report or that metric in some way that drives action. And when you communicate, you all want to be on the same page. You want to have the same definitions. You want to have a common understanding. Or do you sit in a meeting and one side of the table is talking about 12 things and the other one's talking about 9, and 3 of them are different and they're arguing about the definition of whatever, and before you know it, the meeting's over. It happens all the time. But once you can communicate well, then you can relate. And every relationship needs communication. Just ask anybody you love. Now, for those of you following along at home, there's only 7 8s here because the 8th 8 is circulate. Data in motion has value. Data can't stand stagnant in a silo somewhere or locked in a PDF or held by somebody who's been there for 30 years and they think that's their value, is the only person who knows where that data is. Those days are over. Data must move across your organization. Data in motion has value. Now, every company has a data story to tell. You have a data story to tell, and it's about why managing data is of strategic importance to your organization. Now, how do you start that? Let me give a way not to start. Today, people say like, every company's a data company, or every company's a software company, or every company as of like 2 years ago, oh, we're all AI companies. No, you're not. I hate to break it to you. You're not a data company. You're a widget company. You're a service company. Because if you go up to your head of sales or your head of manufacturing and say, we're a data company, they're going to look at you like you have two heads. The logic here falls apart. If the tools you used made you the kind of company you are, then every company is a paperclip company. I don't hear anybody bragging about that. Data, and it's a tool. You use it. But I hate to tell you, it's not the kind of company you are. Start your data management, your data modeling story with the essence of your business. What is your business and why does it exist? And I will suggest to you that this phrase coming up next captures the essence of your business. Every company wants to provide value to relationships through brands at scale. Isn't that what you want to do? Don't you want to provide your value to your relationships through your brands at scale? That's what all the departments in your company want to do. But let's break it down. Providing value, 3 ways I've seen to provide value: grow a business, improve the business, protect the business. Don't come up with 37 different buckets. These are the types of words that make sense to the executives and the sponsors in your organization. We want to grow the business, increase sales. We want to improve the business, operational efficiency. We want to protect the business, mitigate risk. We want to do it at scale. Scale takes technology. Technology is hardware, software, data. If you have data, you need data modeling. There's no 2 ways about it. Relationships. You have data about relationships. I mentioned before, you don't have data, you don't have relationships, you don't have a business. So the data about your relationships is the most important data you have. You might call it something different depending on your organization. It could be a customer, a partner, a vendor, a prospect, a citizen, a consumer, a patient, a client, but they're all relationships. And you all have brands. That might express itself in different ways depending on what you actually do or make or provide. It could be a product, a service, an offering, a location, a banner, an ingredient, a materials, a piece parts that go up into making those things. But all that stuff has data, and all that data needs to be well modeled to be able to drive that value that you're looking for. But every CEO is going to say, yes, we want to provide value to our relationships through our brands at scale. And it's your job to connect the fact that your data model does or does not yet reflect and help enable that kind of activity. So in this section here, we talked about the 4 C's. We talked about the 8 8s. Let's talk about the 3 V's. The 3 V's of data storytelling for data management. Obviously, a knowing wink to the 3 V's of big data, but mine are vocabulary, voice, and vision. Vocabulary. You want to establish an accessible vocabulary. The words you use are critically important. I used a whole bunch of words already today that hopefully will resonate more with your business leaders than some of the technical speak you might have, or certainly some of the buzzwords we're all so enamored with and love to show off with each other about knowing. But use the word. If you want to talk to your business, use the language of your business. You want to harmonize your story to a common voice. Now, harmony doesn't mean everybody sings the same notes, but it does mean they will sound great together. What are the ways you talk about this stuff? Do you have a little elevator pitch already set up? What if you bumped into your CEO or one of your business leaders in the elevator or at the holiday party or at the company picnic, and they just went casually, hey, what are you doing for us? Do you have that answer? That 2-sentence answer? Are you getting nervous thinking about how you don't? Good. I'd rather you get nervous because that'll drive some action on your part. Come up with that elevator pitch about why what you're doing is important to what they are doing. And finally, illuminate your business vision. Everything you do in data needs to enable the strategic intentions of your enterprise. Where's your company going, and why is data modeling and data management going to help you get there? I'm going to dive into this one a little bit more because that's the one I think many of you need to beef up maybe in your understanding of what your company does and what it's trying to do. What are the strategic intentions of your enterprise? What is your company trying to do? What business are they really in? What are those challenges? What are those problems? If you don't know them yet, they're all over your company. Your leaders are spouting them out everywhere, in your strategy meetings, in your town halls. What are the first 5 minutes of that? What do they talk about right up front? Here's what we're trying to do. If you're in a public company, you definitely have an annual report. And in that annual report, the first couple pages is a letter from your CEO. And in that letter are probably 3 to 5 things that they're trying to do. And I will guarantee none of them say, we need more data modeling. But they are going to talk about brands, and they are going to talk about relationships, and they are going to talk about doing things at scale. That's where your connection is. That's your in, because they can't get there unless the data you're helping manage and model support those activities. Vocabulary, the words you use, voice the way you talk, and vision why it's important. And the most powerful delivery system ever invented for an idea is a story, said Aaron Sorkin, the great screenwriter. I'm sure you're familiar with some of his work, The West Wing, Social Network, A Few Good Men. You can't handle the truth without data modeling. But all respect to Aaron, and of course, Jack as well. With data modeling, you can handle the truth in your organization. All right. We're going to take a little breather here. Take a sip of water. Think about any Q&A. I've got some more content after this, but I like to take sort of a 3/4 of the way in break and just share and take a moment with the audience, see if there's any questions or any thoughts or anything people would like to have me elaborate a little more on.
So, Jamie from the ER Studio team here, we've got loads of questions, actually, some really good ones. So I'm going to paraphrase a couple of these. So someone's talking about, yeah, we're already doing modeling, but there's models and there's models. So if you're building a data warehouse, for instance, is it okay just to create physical models of the star schemas and the other layers of the warehouse? How do we sell the idea of higher level logical models to our leadership, for instance? So is a physical model good enough?
I mean, you can take the technical part of this, Jamie, but I think you have to share almost a conceptual model, or a theoretical model, not that there's a layer there. So they just understand from the beginning what you're even talking about. I mean, do you believe that the folks that you're presenting this to even have an understanding of what data modeling does and why it's important? So I would suggest, just because the physical model is the most technical, that in terms of presenting it, you may want to, I don't want to say dumb it down, because the audience isn't dumb. It's just they just don't have that understanding. Make it more accessible to a broader audience.
Yeah, I think your 4 C's sort of hit the nail on the head. So the physical side of things is all around the technology and the implementation. Before you're doing anything, you've got to start with understanding the business, understanding the mission. So you're talking about a thing called a customer or a product. How do you identify one of those? It might be that all of your physical systems do it in a different way. So you've got to reconcile all that stuff. So I think your 4 C's hit the nail on the head. But we see so many of our customers that are saying, yeah, we're just going to go ahead and just do some technical physical models, and then ignore sort of the more business friendly logical models or conceptual models. So how do we sell that to leadership? I think that's the question. Good. All right. Other questions we got coming in. We are starting a data as a product program with all the domain teams operating autonomously, run by different parts of the organization. We're the data architecture team. How do we convince them that we need to be involved?
How does that, linking the value and what you're doing in data architecture to these data, you can't build data products without architecture. I mean, and again, use kind of the examples. Trying to explain to folks, sometimes you just kind of take almost the poetic side, right? Architecture, everybody does understand what architecture is. Maybe not data architecture, but they certainly understand the concept of architecture and building things and foundations versus, the nice little doodads you're putting on the roof versus pouring the right concrete for the foundation. So, you want to have that benefit part. And then you also, if you can find an example that's relevant, similar to my 7-Eleven example of, a million ways to spell something, and you may have a different example depending on the context, have those in your back pocket too. At some point, you got to show the data product team that their data baby's ugly. It's not going to be easy, but you can help make it better. So find kind of some examples to show them and say, we've got to be in the room where it happens here. You can't go too far in this stuff because we provide the standardization, we're providing the way to scale a lot of these definitions, whatever those high level benefits are that you're providing, and showing them that what you do is absolutely critical to the steps they're trying to take.
Love it. Yeah, I think I like that analogy of sort of architecture and building. It's the same process as building a house, isn't it? You start off with some woolly requirements. We create a nice sort of sketch that everybody can understand, and we agree on that sketch. This is what we want. Great. But only when you've agreed that sketch, then you start.
Call it a blueprint.
Yeah, yeah, that's it. But a high level blueprint in business language before you start getting down into the nuts and bolts and the physical stuff. Just get it right. And I think the other part of architecture is then sort of, all right, yeah, we've got all these different domains across the organization. They're all sort of decentralized. Let's start thinking about some of your eights, the sort of interoperability, that standardization. Sort of, let's agree on some things first before we get going. How do we identify one of these? What's the definition of one of these things? What are the different subtypes of one of these things?
A lot of this flows together. I'm sure you've got folks who are still, having similar frustration in the data governance group, in the master data management group, in all these disciplines that are absolutely mission critical, that frankly don't get the respect and funding and support that they need. You may want to team up with some of those folks as well to tell a broader data management, data modeling, data governance story from which a lot of the activities that you do individually will come. But it's that voice part of those 3 V's. What's a common voice? So no matter who they talk to in the data department, they're hearing the same thing. We've got to get this stuff right first before we can go too far.
Beautiful. Beautiful. I've got one more question. I know you've got a bit more content, but how should data governance and data modeling teams work together?
I'm not an organizational expert here, but obviously, that shared understanding of what the common business outcomes need to be is a place to start. And as long as you begin with that, think about that vision V I talked about. Do both teams, are they trying to enable the same sort of stuff? Do they recognize the strategic intentions of that enterprise? And so, on a day-to-day basis, however you organize, you work together, but I'm just thinking more just holistically and philosophically, and are your intentions aligned around the same goals for the organization? I think it's a helpful way to think about it.
Love it, love it. Yeah, I think data modeling can give you that structure. Your comment on structured versus unstructured. You're going to govern your organization. Let's tell a story about that organization. What are the pieces, the elevator pitch that you were talking about? What does this organization look like in terms of its data? Chunk it up nicely with some good models, and then use that picture to decide where we're going to do our governance first.
Analogies are beautiful, right? Because analogies help really, are a shortcut to understanding. As a side note, it's why I hate data is the new oil so much, because unless you're in the oil business, you spend 20 minutes explaining what you mean by that. So, but the best source of analogies to use is actually your own business. Think about your business as an analogy for what you need to do with data. And I've seen a lot of examples of this. I worked with a shipping company, and we talked about how every piece of data needs to be tracked. We need to understand the provenance. We need to know where it's going, the contents handled differently so that end user gets what they need when they need it. I heard a CDO of a water utility talk about, we have this trusted reservoir of content. It flows through all our pipes. Every user can turn the spigot and we'll get a trusted content coming out of it. Use the friend of mine who's the head of IT for SeaWorld, he called his data program Data World. How hard's that? Use the same typeface, use some dolphins, cute little thing. Something creative is the point. Try to do something creative, because especially in the data space where, again, those soft skills are not always there, but something creative can break through the clutter, can help you make a point so much faster. So play with those ideas a little bit. You're not doing, ads on TV. You don't need Madison Avenue ad agency, but, maybe there's somebody in marketing who can help you put the story together in a way that shows what you're trying to do is similar to what the company is trying to do, as an analogy.
Cool. Good answers.
Cool.
Yeah, we'll hold fire on any more questions. And we'll
right.
come back at the end. Thanks.
Anyway, living happily ever after. How do you live happily ever after? Once upon a time, telling your data modeling story to your organization. Every enterprise has a data modeling story, and it's based on delivering value to your relationships through your brands at scale. There's two types of data storytelling out there. Remember, one about the data, data management, determining the truth, and the other with data, business intelligence, deriving meaning. You want to balance the how and the why. I over-rotated on the why because that's what my skill set is about, but you want to know how to do it if they do say yes. Once they say yes, that's where the how comes in. But remember, start with that why. Leverage those 3 V's of data storytelling if that helps you. Establish an accessible vocabulary, harmonize to a common voice, and illuminate your business vision. Try the 4 C's if they work: code, company, category, country. Try the 8 8s if that kind of thing helps you. Whatever helps you is what's valuable. And stories can move faster than processes. An effective narrative can capture the hearts and minds of your business. It can motivate your team to help them understand why what they're doing is important. It is a superpower. It can turn people, and their attitude can go from, I have no idea what you're talking about, to, how do we live without this? That's magic. So get better at it. Get better at storytelling for your organization. And the last page in my book, hardware comes and goes, software comes and goes, but data remains. Again, I'm Scott Taylor, the Data Whisperer here. I want to thank you all for your time and attention, and we'll see you next time.